All right, so in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can book appointments using a voice AI assistant. In this demo, we are going to use the voice API, aka VAPI. We're going to use N8N, which is a replacement for Make.com, and GoHighLevel for our calendars and sort of our backend CRM functions. Now, if you're new to automations, if you are new to this channel, this is sort of an advanced topic, but follow along because I'm going to do my best to simplify it so that you can literally copy and paste. Everything that I do in this demo will be provided to you in a handout for free down below. Click the link, drop your email, I'll send it over to you for free. There's no upsells or anything. Now, this is a complex workflow, and so if you're new to N8N, I understand. It's kind of the new kid on the block, but maybe you've heard of Make.com. And essentially what it is a no-code, low-code automations platform where you can sort of click and point and design workflows without needing to know how to code. Now, Make.com has been in the market for a while, but there's a new kid on the block, which is N8N. And the nice thing about N8N is one of my favorite things is it allows you to self-host, which means that you can, it's open source one, which means that they're not hiding the source code. You can go to their repository and see exactly how it's built. But then you can take that source code and deploy it in your environment. Now, what does that do for you? That allows you to run these automations, run these workflows for a really cheap price. You don't have to pay some expensive subscription like with Make.com. Now, N8N does provide you with the ability to not self-host because that might be a little advanced for you. And maybe you don't have that much that you want to run, so it's still economical to run it on their cloud platform, which is what we're going to do today. I'm just going to show you how we do it on the cloud platform. Maybe in a future video, I'll show you exactly how we self-host our own N8N. But for this example, I'll use N8N Cloud Platform. Now, if you're new, I'll include a link down below to N8N, support the channel. If you want to sign up using that link, it's actually free to sign up. So I'm not sure that I'll get anything, but if you choose to become a power user and, spin more cycles on it, you'll end up spending a little bit of money. So here's what we're going to do. Essentially, we're going to use the voice API. We are going to configure a voice assistant that we're going to call into, and then we're going to tell it that we want to book an appointment for a specific time. We're just going to speak to it in natural language. That natural language is going to get sent over to N8N, and it's going to go through a process of booking the appointment. Now, it's going to sort of handle a few scenarios. One, we need to create the contact because we're not calling GoHighLevel, we're calling voice API. So we need to create the contact inside of GoHighLevel. Anytime somebody calls, we should create that contact, right? We want to store that data. But if that contact already exists, what do we do? Okay, so that's one of the scenarios it's going to handle. And then also, we're going to try to book an appointment. Well, what happens if that slot is not available? Well, we're going to go get some free slots, and then we're going to respond back to the person on the phone live in real time. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that using VAPI tools. So without further ado, let's sort of hop right into the demo. So if you're used to seeing some of my previous tutorials, I try to stay as organized as possible. I try to create a framework. It's a work in progress. I'm learning alongside you as well. And as I solve problems in my business, I like to show them to you as well. So if you're liking the content, if you get value out of it, please comment down below, subscribe, all that jazz. But first thing we need to do is we need to create a booking calendar. That's a pretty basic task, and that's not what this video is about. So I'm just going to show you sort of where the calendar is at. And in this example, we are going to use this real AI calendar. Just copy this calendar ID. I recommend for this tutorial, you just open up a Scratchpad, just a blank document where you can copy and paste some things so you can reference later. So here is my Scratchpad. I already have that calendar ID copied, so we're not going to worry about that. So after you create the booking calendar, we are going to create a private integration. And what does that private integration do inside of GoHighLevel? It allows you to connect external applications to your GoHighLevel. And also, it allows you to use the version 2 of the API without having to go through the entire OAuth sequence, requesting a token, getting an access token, an expired token, all that stuff. You don't have to do that anymore. They created what's called private integrations, and that will provide you with an API key, and essentially you just use it like any normal API. If you're new to APIs, don't worry about it. It's not particularly important that you completely understand it or that you're an expert. We're going to go over some of the things to pay attention to. So let's go ahead and create our API key. So if we come into settings here, let me back out. We'll go into settings, and then let's go into private integrations. And then we're going to create a new private integration. Let's just name it. We'll name it N8N for simplicity. Give it a description of N8N. Now, you may want to be more descriptive in your scenario where maybe you want to define a scope and you want to put that in the description. So scopes are essentially permissions. What permissions are you going to give this user or this key the ability to do in your account. It's very important that you don't just give it everything, because if you lose that key or if somebody compromises it, then they might be able to do stuff like mess with your payments or, other things that can cause damage to you. So we're going to try to keep it as minimal as possible. We're dealing with the calendar and we're dealing with the contacts. So let's go to scope so we can search for calendar. And it looks like we need to view calendars. We want to edit calendars. We want to view calendar events and edit calendar events. And that should be enough for calendars. Okay. Next thing we need to do is we're dealing with contacts. So let's come in here and search for contacts. And you have view and edit contacts. So we're going to give it those two scopes, view and edit contacts. And that should be enough for what we needed to do. So let's go ahead and create. And this is going to print out a key. Now, you do not want to share this key. You do not want to show it on YouTube like I am. Don't worry. I'm going to delete this key as soon as this video is complete. But this key, it's important that you copy this into your Scratchpad right now, because after you click this X button, you are not going to be able to see that key again. And if you didn't copy it, you're just going to have to recreate a new key so that you can see this. So very important that you copy this into the Scratchpad. I'm just going to go ahead and paste. There it is. Now, if you're using Google Docs, one thing that'll get you is Google Docs likes to automatically capitalize your first letter. So this API key is case sensitive, kind of like your passwords, very case sensitive. So if this P becomes a capital letter when you copy and paste it, you're going to have some issues. And so make sure that there's no extra spaces before or after, and make sure that capitalization doesn't get you, because it will, trust me. Now, let's see, we've got our private integration, we gave it the calendar mods and the contact mods, and now we need to configure our baseline N8N workflow. Let's clean up our tabs here real quick. So we're here in N8N. If you're new, you can sign up for free. You don't even need to put your credit card in. If you see here, I'm on a 14-day free trial. That's because I self-host my own N8N and I don't use the cloud deployment. But for this example, I figured you may be using the cloud deployment, so I'm going to do it in there. I didn't have to put in my credit card. It gave me a free account. So let's go ahead and create a new workflow. First thing we're going to do up here on the top left is we are going to name it VAPI appointment booking workflow. All right, first thing we're going to do is add a step, and we need to add a trigger, which is Webhook. And so what a webhook is our workflow is going to be listening at an address. Think about it as like your home address. And VAPI, as soon as it meets criteria to reach out and talk to N8N, this is the address it's going to send the message to. And so it's very important that we listen, and we listen for a specific type of message. Okay, so in this case, we're going to listen for what's called a post message. That means it's going to post some data to us. It's going to give us data about the call. And so we want to be able to handle that method. Next thing we want to do in this response area here, we're not going to respond immediately. We kind of want to leave the channel open, because we are going to do some things and then we're going to tell it how to respond. So here's what we'll do is we'll respond. We're going to be using the respond to webhook node. Okay. If you don't do that, when you try to test it, it's going to close the connection, and sort of the voice assistant's going to be left with like, hey, I passed the information, but nothing really came back. They stopped talking to me. They hung up the phone, right? Now, important, you have a test URL and a production URL. We're going to be using the test URL for now while we're creating the workflow. But when it's time to go production, when we activate this workflow so we can use it in real time, we're just going to have to switch to the production URL. I'll probably forget in the video and we'll troubleshoot it live. That's okay. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to listen for this test event, and then that's our webhook. So what we'll do is actually create our tool and our assistant so we can start sending data to this webhook. So let's go and configure the N8N. I should have said configure that's the N8N webhook. Let's configure the tool, the appointment booking tool. So let's go into tools here in VAPI. If you're new to VAPI, also free to sign up. Now you're going to need a phone number, so you will add your credit card here. I think it's like $3 for a phone number. If you want to follow along, just go ahead and do that. I'll include a link down below as well. That will be an affiliate link. If you want to support the channel, use that link. If you already have an account or you don't want to support the channel, that's cool too. Just follow along. So now let's create a new tool, and I sort of laid out what I want to call everything here. And where is this? That's the formatter. Here we go. So we are going to create a custom tool, and server URL is going to be our webhook address. So let's go back into our workflow. Let's copy that just by clicking it, come back in here and just paste. So save. Next. Now it's going to ask us to build our schema. And what that is sort of what information, what structured data do you want to provide to the webhook? And, in this example, at a minimum, we want to pass over the contact name and then the desired booking time, the requested appointment time. And so all you're doing here is saying, hey, these two things need to get passed to this webhook, and then let N8N handle the rest. But at a minimum, pass these two things. That's what it expects. So let's go ahead and work with name. And then I just have these already sort of pre-formatted here so that we're not wasting time. It is a string. If it was a number, you would say number, or if it's true or false, you'd use Boolean, but right now it's just a string. And then we are going to add another property, which is requested appointment. And then we are going to paste this, which is the description. Essentially, it says include the desired date and time of the appointment. Example, tomorrow at 2. So if somebody calls and they said, hey, I want to schedule an appointment for tomorrow at 2, it's literally going to pass the words tomorrow at 2 to N8N, and then we're going to sort of handle the rest after that. Save that, and then I'm going to require that the requested appointment time is annotated, because we need that in order to do the workflow. So next, and then we're just going to name this tool, which is appointment request. We will be referring to that name inside of our prompt, and just give it a brief description when the customer wants to book an appointment. All right, we're not going to worry about sort of these advanced messages, so we're just going to create our tool. And that's that. Next thing we're going to do is create our assistant. So let's come into assistants. We can name it appointment booking test. That's fine. Deploy from blank. And what we're going to do is in the first message here, how can I help you today? I'm not going to focus on prompting in this demonstration. I'm just going to put in a quick demonstration prompt so that we are speeding through this. Like the prompt is very important. I don't want to sort of glaze over that, but this is not the point of the video. The point of the video is to see how we handle appointment booking live, on a call. So let's just copy this. Essentially, we're saying, hey, if the user says they want to book an appointment, use that tool, appointment request, that we just created. If you book it, cool, tell them you're good to go. If the booking slot's not available, give them 2 booking slots, and this is how you should speak. That's all we're saying. Let's go ahead and publish. And then let's go to functions, and then we're going to select the tool we just created. So you have this appointment request tool. That's the tool we just created. Let's go ahead and select that. And then the only other thing I'm going to enable is this predefined function, which is the ability for the assistant to end the call. If it knows it's at the end of the call, it can hang up. So let's go ahead and publish that. And then lastly, I'm going to assign a phone number to this assistant so that I can call that phone number and test it. So let's see, appointment booking. And that should assign it. And let me just copy this phone number. I'm going to go to sort of my other screen here to make this call. And I'm going to make the call. I'm going to request an appointment. And data should be going to the voice API because it's listening. Oh, well, maybe it's not anymore. It's listening now. And then we'll take that data, store it, and work with it in our workflow. So let me go ahead and make that call.
How can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book an appointment for tomorrow at 2.
This will just take a sec.
All right, cool. So, no respond in the webhook. Okay, webhook node found in the, let's see. Okay, cool. So it's actually, it wants to see a response in there, right? Because we said we are responding to the webhook with the webhook node. So for now, we'll just end it immediately and then listen for events because I just want to collect that data and then we'll change that after the fact. So let's go ahead and make that call one more time.
How can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Great, Justin.
All right, cool. Hung up. So we have the data that we need now. So this is data from the call. As soon as I told the voice assistant I want to book an appointment, it reached out to that address and it sort of gave me all this information, all this data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this data, and that allows me to work with this data for the rest of the creation and the workflow so I don't have to keep making test calls. Now, this isn't a perfect solution, but it works 99% of the time, so we're going to try to work with it. I wonder if I change this setting now, if it will stay, and I think it will. So I just changed the response to, we're using the respond to webhook. That's going to be the last node that we use in our workflow, so it will exist, so it shouldn't error out next time we try. All right, cool. So what do we need to do now? So let me pop open my handy dandy reference workflow. So we are going to format the time. So if we look at create an appointment, right here. This is the GoHighLevel API documentation. And the GoHighLevel API documentation allows you, and if you don't know what an API is, it's essentially how programs talk to programs. And inside of N8N, we're creating a program to talk to another program, which is GoHighLevel, and we are creating an appointment. But there's specific information that the GoHighLevel API expects, and it expects it in a specific format. So we are going to use OpenAI, ChatGPT, to help us format that so that we don't have to do like all these like coded solutions. We're trying to keep this no code, right? So what we're gonna do here is, it looks like it needs a calendar ID, too easy. It needs a location ID, that's too easy. It needs a contact ID, interesting. But what we're looking for right now is it needs a start time, okay? We're gonna provide it with a start time and an end time, but it needs it in this very specific format. And that specific format is called like ISO 8601. Tell you for sure here. Yep, ISO 8601 format. So we need to translate tomorrow at 2 p.m. to ISO 8601 format. So how do we do that? We are going to add a node here, and we're going to search for OpenAI. We're going to message a model. We're going to name this. What are we going to name this? Start and date formatter. Okay. And I have credentials already loaded in here, but if you are new to N8N, you're going to have to go to your OpenAI dashboard, create an API key. If you don't know how to do that, there's plenty of documentation out there. As a matter of fact, you can ask ChatGPT how to do it, and it'll teach you exactly how to create an API key. But what you will do here is you would come into create a new credential, and then you would just drop your API key in there and click save, and you should be good to go. But I already have one attached, so I'm not going to sit here and paste my API key for you guys to use my credits. So here we're going to message a model, and then we're just going to select GPT-4o. Okay, and then we are going to add in a system prompt. Now in this handout, I have the system prompt so you don't have to type it out. What I'm doing here, if let's just review it really fast, we're just telling it, hey, you're a time formatting system that takes natural language and translate it to ISO 8601. We give it some rules. Hey, parse the natural language and then create a start time and an end time. Here's what you're expected to receive. And then this is what you're expected to output. Pretty basic. If you want to pause the video and sort of read through it, you can. But again, this is going to be provided to you. So let's come in here and let's say, I always like to use the expression. So you have sort of fixed mode where you can just copy and paste plain text, or you can use the expression mode. And then I like to pop open this editor, and that allows you to sort of drag and drop variables if you have variables. This specific prompt does not have variables, but the user prompt is going to have variables. So just make sure that's in there, make sure that's formatted as we expect it, remove spaces if they're in there, and then close. Now we're going to add a message, which is a user message. And if we come back into our handy dandy scratch pad, we're just going to copy this. Hey, this is what we need you to work on. So let's come here, and then again, we're going to come into expression. We're going to pop this open, and in the handout, I have this. I should add a little close caret here. Anything that says drag and drop, which we're going to require you to drag and drop stuff. So just delete this drag and drop word, and then we're looking for natural language time. So if we come in here and look at our webhook that came in, we should see the arguments, the name that we requested, and then the structure. This is a structured data that we told the tool to gather, and then the natural language requested appointment. So we're just going to grab this. If you're not seeing sort of these boxes like this, let's exit out of here, but you should be looking at schema. You can look at this at like table view, and you won't be able to, well, I guess you can drag and drop, and then JSON view. Actually, every view allows you to drag and drop. That's really nice, but we're going to keep it in schema view. Let's go ahead and pop back open our editor, and then we are going to find that data again. So requested appointment, and we're just going to drag it in between these quotes here. So you have a double quote, you have these squiggly brackets, which is your variable, and then you have the end double quotes. So that is the input. And now, lastly, very important, we want to output our content as JSON. And we want to do that because one, we told it in the system prompt, return JSON to us. But two, we want that JSON to be parsed so that we can refer to those values in a different node. So let's go ahead and test that. And cool. You see the output of this, it actually went through and it gave us our time in the specific format we requested. Now, one thing I failed to mention, in this system prompt, I told it that it is using the Eastern time zone, okay? If you're in another time zone, account for that time zone. Because if you notice right here, we have sort of the -500, which is the time offset. You need to account for your time zone. So make sure you do that appropriately. Cool. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to create a contact. And why are we going to do that? I mentioned earlier, if we're calling the VAPI number, VAPI doesn't natively have anything to do with GoHighLevel. So one, if somebody calls, we want to create that contact inside of our GoHighLevel. But what happens if that contact already exists? Well, in that case, we're going to do something called error handling. And we're essentially going to just grab the contact ID because ultimately we want the contact ID, whether the contact ID exists or not. We want to create one or get the one that already exists and pass it into the appointment booking API call. You'll see what I mean here in a second. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to add a new node. We're going to name it HTTP request. And in here, we're going to look at what it takes to create a contact. So if we come into the handy dandy API docs, it looks like it is a post request. So if we come back in here, let me drag this over so we're neighbors. All right, so we're looking at a post request. The endpoint, which is this URL, we're just going to copy it and we are going to paste it in the URL. And let's see what information we need. So authentication. Authentication here is handled very similarly to the OpenAPI stuff with a little bit of difference. So what we're going to do here is go to generic credential type, and then we're going to go to header authentication, and then we're actually going to create a new one if you don't have one already. But I already have one. I'm just going to edit it because I did delete a key in the past. So I'm going to delete this right here. Matter of fact, I'm going to trash this. We're going to do it from scratch just so that we could do it together. So let's create a new credential, and then let's name this GHL test account. And then very important here, everything here is very case sensitive, and everything here is very like space sensitive. So case sensitive, space sensitive, don't capitalize something and then don't add spaces in the beginning or at the end. And if there is a space in the middle, make sure that space is there. You'll see what I mean. So here we're going to say authorization. Not authentication, authorization. No spaces before or after. And then in the value, what I want you to do is come in here. Let me turn off my sort of last pass for this because this is going to get annoying. So turn off for this site. Turn it off. Cool. So what I want you to do here, if you type in here, it's just going to look like a password. And so you're not going to be able to troubleshoot sort of what you have in there. So click on expression. And then what you're going to do is type in bearer, B-E-A-R-E-R, space, very important. And then that API key that we created earlier, we are going to paste it exactly as it came out. No spaces in the beginning or after. So copy that. This is very important because if not, if you don't pay attention to detail here, you're going to get extremely frustrated. So let's go ahead and save that. So that just saved that credential for us. So we won't have to do that again in previous API calls, or in future API calls, I should say. Headers. So that's automatically going to add a header for authentication, but we need to add one more header, which is version. Also case sensitive, capital V. Notice that. Attention to detail when dealing with APIs is huge. Inevitably, we're going to mess it up live and we'll troubleshoot together. That's okay. So we're going to paste that. So if we come in here, sometimes the version isn't shown here in the header, but if you come into the example parameters here, sometimes it's in there. Or if you come into, you see like the version header is annotated. There's like one API call that we'll run into where it's not here, but it's expecting it. So it's kind of frustrating, but I just wanted to point that out. All right, so we have the version here, and then now let's see what information it wants from us. So the location ID is the only required field here, and then it has all these other pieces of information we can pass in. We're not going to pass in all this information. We really are only going to pass in the name, and we're going to pass in the phone number. So let's come in here and send body, JSON, use fields below, and let's just say name. This is also case sensitive. So if you're new to this, I would literally copy and paste these because sometimes they use what's called camel case and you don't want to mess up the casing. So you should copy and paste if you're new to this. I should be copying and pasting, but I'm not going to because I'm trying to condense this. Now let's go to name. So we need to pass in the name. So in our webhook, we requested the name, right? And the name is Justin. So we can just drag and drop it as the value. And you should see that it resolves to Justin. Perfect. That's what we want to send to GoHighLevel. Next thing we want to do is pass over the phone. So instead of guessing what the parameter is, we're going to come to our documentation, copy, paste phone, and then let's look for the phone number. So if we come in here, scroll down to the information that VAPI sent to us, the incoming phone number should be in here somewhere. Let's see if we can find it. There it is. So customer number. Awesome. So we're just going to drag and drop. And there goes the phone number. Great. Now, here's what we're going to do. Here in options, what I want you to do is select response, and then I want to include the response headers and statuses. What that's going to do is in the event we try to create a contact and that contact fails because the contact already exists, it's not going to omit the error. We want the error code in there, okay? And then also never error, we can turn that on because I don't want it to just stop the workflow. I want it to keep going because we're going to handle that error later. So let's go ahead and test this step. And let's see. It says that there was an error. This token does not have access to this location. Cool. We didn't even tell it what location we're in, so that's where the error came from. I said the location ID was a required field, but I didn't provide it. So we're going to go ahead and copy this, and this is camel case. You notice location is lowercase, the I in ID is uppercase, and then the D is lowercase. This is why it's best practice to just copy and paste. So let's come in here and add another body value. So I'm in the body parameters, add location ID, and then in my scratchpad, I have the location ID already printed here. All right, so let's go ahead and see. That doesn't need to be a variable because the location ID is going to be the same. We're dealing with the sub account. Now, if you're using this workflow for multiple sub accounts, then you're just going to have to create logic to determine which sub account you want to talk to. But let's go ahead and test that. Cool. You see this green check mark? It looks like we are good to go, and we created the account, or we created our contact. If we come into our sub account, we should see that contact created, and we do. So that's good stuff. Next thing we're going to do, we're assuming success this whole way through, and then we'll deal with failure here in a second, but let's just assume success for now. So I'm referencing my handy dandy reference pad here. So we're going to edit. We're going to create an edit node, and all this is doing here is we're going to set a variable. So we are going to set contact ID, just naming that field. And we are going to manually map. We're going to add a field. We're going to name it contact ID. And then this contact ID that was returned from the HTTP request, we're just going to drag and drop in the value and save it. So we'll test this step. And you see that it returns an object here, which is contact ID perfectly. That's exactly what we needed. Now we're going to book the appointment. So if we come in here, we are going to use an HTTP request again to send an API call to GoHighLevel, where we want to book an appointment, which is this endpoint. And so we're going to post data to this endpoint. So I'm going to copy that. Let's make an HTTP request. Let's name this book appointment. I said we were going to post and then paste that endpoint in there. Authentication is going to be the same, generic credentials, header authentication, and then our authentication we created earlier. Send headers, we're going to send version, capital V. Now, don't just assume it's the same version. Pay attention to the documentation and copy and paste what's in here, because there are different endpoints. These are called endpoints right here. There are different endpoints that have different versions. So we'll just paste that in there. And let's see what it expects. So in the body, it expects us to have this information: calendar ID, location ID, contact ID, which we just stored, and a start time at a minimum. We're also going to provide it with the end time. So you don't have to. If your calendar is normally set for an hour, it's automatically going to book an hour-long appointment, but we're going to give it an end time. So let's go in here and send body. All right, I'm going to have to go back and reference this. Sorry if it makes you dizzy, me switching back and forth, but calendar ID, and then we have, I believe it's location, yep, location ID, contact ID, and where's my contact ID? It's not on my scratchpad, it's in the variable that I just set. So we're just going to drag and drop that contact ID there, and there it is. You want to use that variable because the contact ID is going to change for every caller, or so long as it's not a repeat caller. And then the next two things I think is start time and end time. So start time, we're We're going to add a parameter. And then here we provided ourselves that start time with ChatGPT. So if we come in here, we can just drag and drop start time. Perfect. That's what we expect in there. And then let's add a parameter, which is end time. And then we can just drag and drop end time. Sweet. Now here, what we are going to do is same thing. We're going to come into the response, and then we're going to include a response, and we're going to never error. And then let's test that. Awesome. It looks like we booked the appointment programmatically, not having a conversation, but just in the workflow, which is important to do. Let's go to calendar, appointments, and there's our appointment right there. Cool. So it did exactly what we thought it was going to do. So we are going to proceed with our workflow, assuming all success. So next thing we're going to do is let's respond to the webhook, because that's what we told the trigger webhook that we're going to do. We're going to respond to the webhook. And so this is probably a little bit difficult for you to wrap your head around if you're not familiar with the APIs, but essentially VAPI called N8N and said, hey, this person wants to book an appointment at 2 p.m. I'm using the call analogy. It didn't actually call it. It's doing it using APIs, and it's waiting for a response from N8N. So this is our response. Once we give this response, if there's nothing after it, N8N's going to essentially hang up, right? So I probably shouldn't use a call analogy because there's actually going to be a call going on, but hopefully you get it. So we're going to respond with JSON, and then there's a very specific format in which we're going to respond. So for some reason, we can't use expression in here until we like drag and drop something. So if I drag and drop something, the expression opens up. So I'm just going to pop this open, delete this, and then I should actually provide this to you in the handout, and I will. Let me just copy and paste that really fast for you. So let me do that in here. And yeah, that doesn't look well. So let's see. Response. Webhook. Again, this handout's going to be available for you to download. So let's see if I can put this in here. I think I have an extension for code blocks. I do. So we're going to start a code block, and we will paste that. Format. Sorry, you're having to watch this. Okay, there it is. I don't know why it's showing up in white. Yeah, I do want a background. Format. Give me the background. There you go. Okay, cool. So you should be able to come in here and just copy this and then paste it. Now, I'm actually going to put a drag and drop warning here because you're going to need a drag and drop. So instead of these squiggly brackets, sorry, I should have done this before. All right, so let's just delete this. So we want the tool call ID. Now, in the initial webhook, we got some data that is the tool call ID. So if we scroll down here and we look at the data that came in, we have tool call ID. So we're going to paste that in there and then save it. Now, let's test it. Cool. Looks like it happened. So at this point in the video, assuming I'm going to delete this contact, assuming there's no contact, we should be able to book an appointment on the calendar, no problem, because there's no contact, there's going to be no conflicts, and so it's going to go just as expected. So let's go ahead and test that. Let's come in here and bear with me while I make that call. We're going to come in here and we are going to test workflow, which is going to, well, I shouldn't have done that because we have pin data. So now I just created contact again. So let's go ahead and delete that. I'm going to unpin data, and then I'm going to listen for new data. I'm not cutting any of this out because if I did, then, you know, if you were doing it, you just get super frustrated. So let's unpin this data, and then we are going to listen for test events. And so let's go ahead and actually don't like this interface. So I'm going to go back to Canvas while we listen because it's waiting. Let's make this call.
How can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book an appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Great, Justin. Let me check the availability for tomorrow at 2 p.m. One moment, please. Give me a moment.
Okay. So the reason that didn't work is because we were simply just listening for the webhook. We weren't testing the entire workflow. So if I click test entire workflow, it's actually going to listen for the trigger and run the entire workflow. So let's go ahead and make that call one more time.
How can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book an appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Just a sec. Great. Your appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. is confirmed.
Awesome. So the assistant told me that my appointment was confirmed, but I don't quite believe it. So let's go in here and look. So we have a contact created, which is good. And then if we look at our calendars, the appointment was booked. So we just booked our first appointment using a voice AI agent. That's very, very cool. But it's not always going to work that well. So if we come into here, well, if we come into our response here, I'm going to pin this output now, right? Because this is the last call we did. So I'm going to rerun this workflow, and it's going to fail now because the contact already exists, one, and two, the appointment's already booked. So it's just going to fail. So let's see what happens when I run this workflow again. Awesome. So let's see. It looks like when I came in here, the response was a status code 400, which is a failure. So if we come in here to settings, I want to, on error, I want to continue using error output. So let's go ahead and do that. And what that's going to do is create an additional sort of branch here. And so I disconnected it from set contact ID. Follow me here, and we are going to set contact ID. And sort of the same thing we did before. Let me provide it with some context here. So if I test this step, awesome, it failed. Well, it succeeded. Why did that succeed? It shouldn't succeed. It should never error. I wonder if never error doesn't need to be enabled. Let me double check that. Yeah, let's go ahead and here's what we're going to do. We're going to disable that. Let's see what happens when we do that. There you go. Okay. So disable the never error, but we do want to see the response codes. And then we're going to do the same thing for booked appointment. We're going to come down here and disable never error because we're going to handle that error specifically a certain way. So in the settings, you have this sort of on error, and we want to select continue using error output. Now, when we do this, this is going to pass some information into set fields. Now, here is, this is difficult. So there's two ways to go about this. We can use what's called regular expressions, which the reason we need to use it is we get this sort of blob of text, right? And in this blob of text, the error code provides us with the contact ID. And that's what we really care about. We just want the contact ID so we can update the contact, or really book the appointment with the contact ID, because that's a required field in that API call. But this doesn't, GoHighLevel doesn't return the error code in like a pretty structure. So we're going to have to pull the contact ID out of here. So I'm going to give you some magic to do that, which you don't have to spend time on. But another way you can do this is you can add another OpenAI node and then pass it to ChatGPT and say, hey, out of this blob of text, just give me the value that's contact ID, and then it would work that way. But we're going to use regular expressions here, and I will give you this code so that you can use it yourself. Now, let me save it in here. Contact ID regex parser. And I'm going to paste that in here, and I'll make that a code block for you. Cool. Format. Awesome. There it is. So I am going to say this part is drag and drop. You'll see what I mean here in a second. And if you have to slow down the video, pause, you can. Or rewatch this a few times, you can. But what we are going to do is come in here and copy this. And then we're going to add a field. We're going to name it contact ID the same way we did before, because we're going to reference that. We already referenced that in our appointment booking. So we want that to be the exact same. If we forgot what that was, go back to the other set contact ID and just copy this and then come down here. Okay. And then let's see, we're just going to name this set contact ID as well. And then come back into our scratch pad, copy this, and then value. We're going to go to expressions, pop this open, and paste. So that's going to be red. That's fine. That's what we expect. We need to remove this drag and drop. And then we need to pass in this error code. So if you click on message from the error code, you're going to drag and drop that right before the period. And at that point, that sort of magic regular expressions is going to pull out the contact ID. Handout's going to be there for you. You don't need to know. If you're really curious, go into ChatGPT, paste that in there and ask it what it's doing. It'll tell you. So let's test the step. Awesome. There's the contact ID. That's what we expected. So now, next thing we need to do is book the appointment. So we literally just take this plus icon and connect it to that and book the appointment. So now if the contact already exists, it's going to go down this route. It's going to set the contact ID. It's going to pull it out of that error message, and then it's going to book the appointment anyway. Now let's pop this open, and we already turned this off, but in the settings here, we want to continue using error output. And so if I test this step, it should fail because the appointment already exists. Oh, and actually we don't have data to push in. So let's go ahead and test this workflow really fast. Awesome. So I just ran it all the way through using the data that we had in our last webhook, and it failed. Why? Because we asked for tomorrow at 2, and we already have an appointment for tomorrow at 2. So it failed. That's what we wanted to do because we're engineering the error handling side of the house, the failure side of the house. So now what do we want to do? We don't want to respond to the webhook just yet. We want to query GoHighLevel and see, hey, what are some free times? Now, the challenge in doing that is if you come here to this endpoint, which is get free slots, it expects something pretty awesome and really not awesome. It expects time formats, a start date and end date, and a specific format called epoch time. And epoch time is like time in seconds. I think it's like January 1st or 2nd, 1970. How many seconds have elapsed since then? Not super important for you to understand why that time exists. Just know that computers like to see it that way, and backstory is not important. But furthermore, this wants epoch time in milliseconds. Now, there's actually functions native to N8N and make.com that can actually convert, your ISO 8601 time into this, but we're just going to use ChatGPT, okay? We're going to use ChatGPT. It's our friend. I'm going to provide you with the prompt, and we're going to come in here and add a node, which is OpenAI. And then we're going to message a model, and let's name this epoch formatter. Cool. We have our credentials that we set earlier, and then we're going to message the 4.0 model. And then here we're going to set a system prompt. In our Scratchpad, we have a system prompt in here for the epoch formatter, and I'm just going to copy it here. And if we just review it really fast, essentially we're telling it it's a time formatter in the Eastern time zone. If your time zone is different, you need to change it. And then, hey, take something from 8601, determine the start day and the start of the day and the end of the day, and then provide me with the epoch time in milliseconds. And here's how you expect the input, and here's how I want you to send me the output. Pretty cut and dry, but you don't have to come up with the prompt on your own. So we're going to set expression here, pop open the editor, paste, and we're going to drag and drop current time. Now, AI models aren't super good at knowing what time it currently is. And so I have drag and drop here, but we're not actually going to drag and drop. We're just going to put in a variable. I'll show you what it is. We're going to, and maybe I should just include that in here because since you're not dragging and dropping, the variable is going to be squiggly, squiggly, $now, squiggly, squiggly, okay? And we're just telling it. So we want OpenAI to have like a relative time so that it knows what time it is now and like tomorrow at 2, whatever, it just has that time. So let's go ahead and give it the current time. And yeah, now, cool. All right, and there you go. So that is the system prompt. We'll go ahead and remove this extra space. And now we need to provide it with the user prompt, which is actually the input for it to chew on. So that's the user prompt. Go back in here and let's provide it with this expression, pop open the editor. And then we need to replace this drag and drop with our start time that was provided to us from the OpenAI call earlier, right here. Start time, drag and drop that in between the quotes. Very important that you put it in the right place. And then we're going to test this step. And it didn't give it to us. That's okay. We're going to run the entire workflow and it should provide it. Technically, we can pin the data and then we'll just have to go back and unpin all the data, but I don't want to have to go through all that. So, okay, cool. So what we didn't do was output the content as JSON. You see, if we don't do that, it just provides it to us in like some disgusting plain text that it's going to be impossible to parse. So we just turn that on and let's just test that. Also goes way faster. So there you go. We have the start date and the end date, and here is the epoch time that we needed. That's kind of like the hard part. And so hard part's over. Now what we need to do is we need to go get free slots from this endpoint. Now, this endpoint is a little different than the other ones. Pay attention. So this doesn't even require a body, but it does require headers. And this is the one I was telling you about, where the version isn't shown here. Yeah, it's not shown here. Oh, it is here. It's just lower, right? So they put the versions below, okay? So just pay attention. So we're going to pop this open. We're going to set an HTTP request. And then we're going to make this, I think it's a GET request. Yep. Let's copy this endpoint. So it is a GET request, big green GET request, paste. And you see right here, it's got a placeholder for calendar ID. Let's go ahead and grab our calendar ID from our Scratchpad and place it right here. Let's pop this open so we have more working room. Let's just replace that with our calendar ID. Perfect. And now authentication is going to be generic credential type, and then header authentication with that key we said earlier. Send headers, it's going to be version with a capital V. And then let's go down here, copy this version date, paste it, and then instead of sending body parameters, it's asking for query parameters. And so query parameters are going to be the two required is end date and start date. So if we come in here, we'll scroll up to query parameters, and yes, we're sending query parameters. And so we have end date. Let's do a start date. I don't know why they mention it backwards, but we'll say start date. And then from the epoch formatter, we're just going to drag and drop start date. And then for end date, we are going to drag and drop end date. Okay. Now here we are going to test it. Oh, got to run it all the way through. We didn't pin the data. Awesome. So we have all these time slots that are available on that day, and we're going to pass that back as a response to our webhook. So I'm going to pin this data. Let's see if that'll work. So we don't have to run through the entire workflow again. So we're going to respond to webhook. Remember, we're not responding to it twice. It's either success or failure. And so we have to end it with a response, period. So we're going to come in here. Let me provide you with this in the reference handout. We'll call this response webhook success. And we'll say response webhook suggested times, and that is a failure. Hopefully that makes sense. We don't need it to be bold. Paste. And let's see here, we are going to drag and drop. And here we are going to drag and drop. Now, if you're doing this in make.com, very similar workflow. A few different nuances on the platform, but the workflow is pretty similar. Let's make this a code block. Format. Awesome. So let's go ahead and copy that. Oh, we don't want to do that. Let's copy that code block, come back in here. We are going to respond with JSON. Let's paste something in here just so that it lets us open the expressions. Cool. So this, oh, I misspelled that. Let me not misspell stuff for your handout. Thanks, Google. All right, so drag and drop. Let's just remove this. And then tool call ID. Let's go ahead and find that again. Let's minimize all this stuff. Where is that tool call ID? So if we come down here, we've got this tool call ID. Let's throw it in between these quotes. Perfect. And then the result, we're going to remove this drag and drop, and we just want to give it the slots. So slots, we're going to just put it in right before that quote, and there's the slots. So the prompt on the VAPI end already knows, hey, here's all these slots, but pick the ones that are closest to the one that the user requested. And so let's save this. I don't know if it'll let us test it. Yeah, probably not. Okay. So let's run it all the way through. Let's make sure that it greens up all the way. Awesome. Let's see. Cool. We got greens all the way through. So now I think we are good to go. So right now we have a sort of a, OCD is getting the best of me. So we have a contact that exists in here with an appointment that already exists. And so if I request the same appointment, this workflow should work. So let's see. I shouldn't have done that. So we need to remove our pin data, right? So let's come in here, unpin this data. Anywhere you see a little pin in the bottom corner, we've pinned data before. So let's come in here and unpin this data. And now let's test this workflow and let's give it a call. So let's see. Now I'm going to give it a call. I'm going to ask it to book an appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m. It's going to fail. Well, it's going to tell me, hey, these are the requested, or these are the alternatives, suggested alternatives. But because I'm testing the workflow, I'm going to have to manually start listening again in the middle of the call so that I can actually go through and book the alternative. Now, when the workflow is active, we're not going to have to do that. Obviously, it's always going to be listening on the production URL, which we're going to have to change. So let's go ahead and test it.
How can I help you today?
Hello, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book an appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Hold on a sec. It seems that the requested time slot is not available. Here are some alternative time slots for tomorrow. 1:30 p.m. 2:30 p.m. Would you like to book any of these alternative time slots, or should I check for another option?
Yeah, I'll do 2:30 p.m.
One moment. You're all set for tomorrow at 2:30 p.m.
Awesome. So that worked. You saw how I manually had to kick off the listener. Again, we're not going to have to do that when it's live, but let's just make sure we actually booked an appointment at 2:30. There you go, 2:30. And then our contacts here, we didn't create a duplicate. It's there. So we're working as expected. So let's go ahead and save this. I should have saved this before. Like I went through all this and I didn't save. I don't recommend that. You should save often. But let's go ahead and publish this and sure. And then what we want to do is come in here to the webhook and then our production webhook. We're going to copy this webhook because now that we're published, the production webhook is active. And we're going to come into our VAPI, go into tools, and then under integrations, we're just going to paste our production one in here and then save. That's only when it's published. If you're testing, you could still use the test one. But now that we're published, we're going to come over here to execution so we can see these executions come in live. And then let's go ahead and do a live test. Let's take this full cycle. We're going to delete this contact, and then we're going to sort of call again and try to request a slot that already exists, and then take the suggestion and then book what they suggested. So let's make this call.
How can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Great. Justin, let me check the availability for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Just a moment. Give me a moment. I'm sorry, but the 2 p.m. slot for tomorrow is not available.
Okay, interesting. So it said that the 2 p.m. slot for tomorrow is unavailable, and that shouldn't have been true unless we didn't finish deleting the contact by the time it came through. So let's go ahead and delete this. And I'm also going to double check that this behavior is what we expected. So if we come in here, let's zoom in to see what happened. So contact ID was that. It created the contact, and then it said book an appointment. And it said the slot you have is no longer available. So I think I just didn't allow it to finish deleting before we requested it. So hopefully that's the case. If not, we'll troubleshoot it live. So let's see what we got here.
How can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Let me check the availability for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Just a moment, please. One moment. I'm sorry, but tomorrow at 2 p.m. is not available. Here are the closest available time slots.
Okay, so something is happening here where we're getting an error. Let's see what we're passing in. So let's see what we passed in here. So we have a contact ID of that, and then tomorrow at 2 p.m. we're saying it's not available. Let me make sure just on the calendar it actually is available. There is no appointment set. The contact was created. We're not going to delete it just yet. And it looks like our start time was 2 p.m. Yep. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Let's see what's making that happen. So let's walk it all the way back. So we came in here. Webhook came in. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. was the request. Date and time formatter. Yep. Tomorrow's the 26th at 2 p.m. Awesome. 30-minute interval. We set the contact ID, the contact ID. Let's just make sure that contact ID is actually the contact ID. If we come in here and just say contact ID, ends in EDA. So EDA, yep, that's the contact ID. And then we said book an appointment. We posted it. And then we came down here. We gave it the calendar ID, the location ID, the contact ID, the start time, which is 1400, what we expected, 1430. And then it told us it's not available, which is interesting because it is available. Fascinating. Let's pin this data real quick so we can, yeah, sort of, let's see if we can troubleshoot this. Oh, we can't pin data here. Can we pin that data in here? Let's see. Data's pin. Let's run this through, see what happens. So it works in here, but it doesn't work when we're live. Why is that? All right, so for some reason my video editor quit, which is really scary because we're 58 minutes in and my video recorder stopped. I was in the middle of troubleshooting why we couldn't book an appointment at 2 p.m. It kept failing. And what I found was it just doesn't like 2 p.m. for some reason. I know that's not a good answer, but there could be a bug in the system. There could be an issue with my calendar settings, but I'm not going to take the time to troubleshoot right now. I tried with 1, 1:30, 3. It all worked. So I'm just going to call and give it a different time, and then I'll give it the same time so that we can go ahead and sort of test it. So let's come back in here and give it a call. Let's see. 1 second.
How can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Give me a moment. You're all set, Justin. Your appointment is booked for tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Okay, so literally changed nothing, just changed the time. It's not a good excuse for why it didn't work at 2 p.m. That deserves a little bit more debugging, and I'll take a look into that, and if I find an update, I'll record a video showing you why. But we booked a call for tomorrow at 3 p.m. Everything worked as expected. Now we're going to call again. I did have an existing contact in there, so it went down the failure route, but then it also, cool, we didn't test this scenario in testing, but we went down the contact already existing, but the slot not being available, and it sort of came back up and actually completed successfully as it should have because the slot was available, but the contact was created. Now the contact is created and the slot's not going to be available because I'm going to request the same one. And so it should go and recommend some specific times for me. Hopefully it doesn't recommend 2 p.m. because I don't think 2 p.m. is going to work for some reason, but let's go ahead and see what happens. Let me make sure I know we requested 3 p.m., right? Okay, cool. Calling again.
How can I help you today?
Hey, my name is Justin, and I'd like to book a call for tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Give me a moment. The time slot you requested is not available. Here are some alternative options for tomorrow. 1, 3:30 p.m. 2, 4 p.m. Would any of these times work for you, Justin?
Yeah, I'll do tomorrow at 4 p.m.
This will just take a sec. Great. Your appointment for tomorrow at 4 p.m. is all set. If you need any further assistance, feel free.
Awesome. Let's make sure that actually happened. Okay, cool. We have the appointment at 3 and at 4, and we have one contact in there. Perfect. That's exactly what we expected. So thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for walking this down. I think it's important to sort of see the troubleshooting live in action and the building live in action. I think it's valuable. It's definitely valuable for me when other people create that sort of content. This was a longer video, a more complex video, but hopefully you found it valuable. If you did find it valuable, please like, comment, subscribe. Like I mentioned a few times in the video, the handouts will be available in the description. And if you want to learn some more about voice AI and how I implement it for inbound voice, I also have a $27 course, which honestly the value is freaking ridiculous. But essentially, I walk you through exactly how I set it up. And that course is specifically focused on GoHighLevel organically. There's some bonus content like this video and other videos that show you how to use VAPI for outbound calling. But the majority of that course is to teach you exactly how you can set up a live production voice AI inside of GoHighLevel with no external services to capture what otherwise would have been missed opportunity. I mentioned this at the end of this hour-long video because if you made it this long, you're probably interested in learning more. So I'll leave that link down below as well. And you have a nice day. Till next time. Peace.